Chapter 7. Echoes Beneath Ash and Bone. Amuro felt the dark aura surrounding him, creeping into his very being. The place they had arrived at was one that should not exist. An ancient sanctuary, buried deep beneath the earth, rose before them, emerging from the shadows like a massive, decayed bone. Elyra walked beside him, silent, but her presence was so strong that Amuro could almost feel her internal struggle. Though their fates were now intertwined, she still hid much of her past. He could sense it, the weight of her secrets, and yet there was no time for them to dwell on it now. The shadows of the past were closing in, and every step they took only drew them deeper into the unknown. The entrance to the sanctuary was an arched stone doorway, blackened with age and covered in ash. The air was thick with the stench of decay, as if the very walls had been weeping for centuries. No light reached them, save for the faint violet glow from Amuro's runes, illuminating their path in eerie patterns. "This place," Elyra murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "It feels wrong. As if it's alive, yet dead at the same time." Amuro nodded, his hand tightening around the hilt of his Revenant blade. "It's older than anything we've seen. This isn't just a ruin. It's a tomb. A tomb for something forgotten." They stepped forward, the ground beneath them crunching with the sound of broken stone and bone. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the silence became, until it felt like they were walking through the mouth of some ancient beast. The walls of the sanctuary were carved with strange symbols, runes that glowed faintly, their meanings lost to time. The deeper they ventured, the more the air seemed to hum with an ancient power, as though the very foundation of the earth itself was charged with energy. Suddenly, Amuro's vision blurred, and the shadows around them began to shift. He stumbled, disoriented, and reached out to steady himself against the wall. "What is this?" Elyra whispered, her voice tinged with both awe and fear. Amuro's heart raced as his mind grappled with the sensations coursing through him. The air was thick with magic, dangerous, unpredictable magic. A strange force was pulling at him, drawing him deeper into the heart of the sanctuary. And then he saw it. In the center of the vast chamber ahead, a figure stood motionless. It was tall, cloaked in black, with eyes that seemed to gleam like dark stars. The air around it pulsed, resonating with an unnatural energy. Before Amuro could react, a voice echoed in his mind. "You have entered the sanctum of the forgotten. The price of knowledge is not easily paid." Elyra's eyes widened. "It's here. The power we've been seeking." Amuro didn't answer immediately. His grip on his blade tightened as he took a step forward, the runes on his skin glowing brighter in response to the presence before him. "You seek knowledge, but what will you do with it?" the voice continued, growing louder, almost mocking. "Will you wield it as a weapon? Or will it consume you, as it has consumed so many before you?" Elyra stepped closer to Amuro, her voice shaking slightly. "What does it want from us?" Amuro turned to face her, his mind racing. "Whatever it is, we have no choice but to move forward." Suddenly, the figure moved, stepping out from the shadows. It was not entirely human. Its form seemed to shift between solid and ethereal, like a creature caught between worlds. It was both terrifying and mesmerizing. "You are the ones who have come to claim the thread," the figure intoned. "The last thread. But beware, for the path you walk is one of ruin." Amuro took another step forward, his mind spinning. "The last thread." The words echoed in his mind like a chant, but he couldn't yet grasp their meaning. "Do you know why you are here?" the figure asked, its voice cold and ancient. Elyra's face hardened. "We came to find the truth. We came to end the curse." The figure tilted its head, as if considering her words. "Truth," it whispered, the sound like dry leaves blowing in the wind. "What you seek is not truth. It is a lie, wrapped in shadow, hidden beneath layers of time." The chamber around them seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm, as though it were alive, breathing. Amuro's instincts screamed at him to turn back, but he knew there was no escaping now. The voice in his mind had already spoken, and their fate had already been sealed. "You are bound to the thread," the figure continued, its form flickering. "You are not the first. Many have come before you, seeking the same thing. But none have returned." Amuro swallowed hard, the weight of its words settling over him. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in on them. His heart pounded in his chest as the realization hit him. This was no ordinary sanctuary. It was a prison, a tomb for those who sought forbidden knowledge. But it was also a key. Amuro's fingers twitched as he reached for the blade at his side, preparing for whatever was to come next. The figure's shifting form pulsed with an almost rhythmic energy, as if it were a living embodiment of the sanctuary itself. Amuro's mind was clouded, his senses overwhelmed by the oppressive presence that seemed to hang in the air like a weight. He could feel the magic around him, ancient and heavy, as though it had been waiting for centuries for someone to dare enter its domain. "You are bound to the thread," the figure repeated, its voice a low, resonating whisper that seemed to echo off the walls of the sanctuary. "And with it, you will learn the truth, or perhaps, the consequence of seeking such knowledge." Amuro's hand tightened around the hilt of his Revenant blade. His mind was racing. The last thread. The name, the power, it was all too much to process in this moment, yet the figure before him seemed to be the key to unraveling everything. The weight of its words pressed upon him, urging him to question everything he had believed so far. "You speak in riddles," Amuro said, his voice sharp with growing frustration. "What is this thread? What do you want from us?" The figure's form flickered, its outline becoming more distinct for a moment before it shifted once again, its body rippling like liquid darkness. "You will come to understand," it murmured, its gaze now fixed firmly on Amuro. "But not without sacrifice." Elyra stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. "Sacrifice?" she echoed. "What kind of sacrifice are we talking about?" The figure's eyes glowed with a faint, ethereal light. "The thread binds all things, life, death, time, memory. It is the force that weaves the fabric of existence. And those who seek it must be prepared to lose a part of themselves." Amuro's pulse quickened. "A part of ourselves?" he asked, his voice low. "What does that mean?" The figure seemed to smile, though its lips did not move. "To claim the thread is to lose something precious. A part of your soul, a memory, a piece of who you are. But it is the price of knowledge. The price of power." Elyra glanced at Amuro, her expression unreadable. "What happens if we refuse?" she asked, though the answer was clear in her eyes. The figure's laughter was a hollow sound, as though it came from somewhere deep beneath the earth. "There is no refusal. Once the thread has chosen you, you cannot turn back. You will either claim it, or it will consume you." Amuro's hand trembled on his blade. He had come here for answers, for the truth, but now the weight of that truth was heavier than anything he could have imagined. The figure's words were like poison, slowly seeping into his mind, twisting his thoughts. "But why us?" Amuro demanded. "Why are we here? What makes us worthy of the thread?" The figure's gaze flickered with something akin to amusement. "You are not worthy. None are worthy. But that does not matter. The thread chooses those who are lost, those who have the potential to reshape the world." Elyra stepped closer to Amuro, her voice urgent. "Then we have no choice but to move forward, don't we? We must face whatever comes next." Amuro turned to face her, his eyes meeting hers. He could see the same determination in her gaze, the same sense of resolve that burned within him. There was no turning back now. Not after everything they had endured, everything they had fought for. "We move forward," he said, his voice steady, though his heart was pounding in his chest. "But we do it together. We face whatever comes next, and we end this, once and for all." The figure's form flickered again, its eyes narrowing. "So be it," it whispered. "The thread will test you both. You will be tested in ways you cannot comprehend. And only one will survive the journey." With a final, lingering look, the figure began to fade, its form dissolving into the shadows of the sanctuary. The air around them grew still, the hum of energy fading as quickly as it had come. Amuro and Elyra stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the figure's words pressing on them both. The sanctuary was quiet now, but the tension in the air was palpable. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with danger and unknown consequences. "We're not the first to come here," Amuro said, his voice low, his mind still processing the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. "And we won't be the last." Elyra nodded, her eyes distant. "No. But we can be the ones to end this." They shared a brief, knowing glance, a silent understanding passing between them. The journey was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. Together, they turned and stepped deeper into the sanctuary, their every footstep echoing through the vast, hollow halls. The darkness was waiting, and so was the thread. And no matter what price they had to pay, they would face it head-on. The final test was drawing near, and the only question that remained was whether they could survive it. As Amuro and Elyra ventured deeper into the sanctuary, the atmosphere grew heavier with each step. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, as if the very walls themselves were alive and watching. The faint glow from the runes on Amuro's skin pulsed in time with the rhythmic thrum of an unseen force, as though his very presence here was being weighed and measured. The paths before them twisted, winding through the labyrinthine interior of the sanctuary. Every corner they turned seemed to lead them further into the heart of this ancient place, yet there was no sign of life, no movement save for their own footsteps. "I don't like this," Elyra whispered, her voice barely audible, as if speaking too loudly might disturb something unseen. "It feels like we're being herded." Amuro didn't respond immediately. His thoughts were elsewhere, focused on the words of the figure. Sacrifice. The thread. Everything was starting to piece together, but there were too many unanswered questions, too many uncertainties. His fingers flexed around the hilt of his Revenant blade, feeling the familiar weight of it, though something had changed in its presence. It seemed to hum with a life of its own now, as if attuned to the sanctuary itself. "We need to keep moving," Amuro said finally, his voice low and steady. "We can't let fear guide us now." Elyra glanced at him, her brow furrowed, but she said nothing. They pressed forward in silence, the path narrowing as they descended into what felt like the bowels of the earth. Eventually, they reached a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. The stone here was smooth, polished, almost unnaturally so, and the floor beneath their feet was slick with some kind of dark liquid that shimmered in the dim light. In the center of the room, a pedestal stood, bathed in an eerie glow. Upon the pedestal, a crystal orb pulsed softly, its surface swirling with mist and shadow. It was like no other object Amuro had ever seen, alive with an energy that seemed to pulse in sync with his own heartbeat. Amuro felt an overwhelming compulsion to approach the orb. His body moved of its own accord, as if drawn by some unseen force. Elyra hesitated, watching him warily, but she followed. As Amuro reached out to touch the orb, a voice echoed in his mind, a voice not unlike the figures, but this time colder, more ancient, more foreboding. "The thread calls to you, but it does not come without cost." Amuro's hand hovered over the orb, his fingers trembling. The voice continued, speaking in riddles, weaving a tapestry of threats and promises. "Those who seek the thread must understand that once they are chosen, they are no longer free. The thread does not grant power. It grants purpose. And the price for that purpose is steep." Amuro's heart raced, his mind spinning. The orb seemed to draw him in, its energy intoxicating, its allure impossible to resist. But something in the back of his mind told him this was a moment of choice, the kind that would shape everything to come. "What does it mean?" Elyra asked, her voice urgent. She had seen the change in him, the way his entire demeanor shifted the moment he laid eyes on the orb. "Amuro, don't. This could be a trap." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "I don't think we have a choice," he said quietly, his hand finally resting against the surface of the orb. The moment his skin made contact, the entire chamber seemed to tremble, as if the sanctuary itself had been awakened. The orb's glow intensified, bathing the room in a harsh, blinding light. For a moment, Amuro couldn't see anything but the light, the sound of his heartbeat thundering in his ears. Then, suddenly, the light vanished, and the room was plunged back into the oppressive darkness. But this time, something was different. Amuro felt different. His senses were heightened, the world around him sharper, clearer, more vibrant. But there was a coldness to it as well, a numbness that crept through his veins, spreading through his body. He stumbled back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Elyra caught him, her hands steady on his shoulders. "What happened?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of concern and fear. I don't know," Amuro breathed, his voice distant. "I feel as though something is inside me, watching, waiting. The thread. The words of the figure echoed in his mind. The cost. The price. Elyra's expression hardened, her eyes flicking to the orb once more. "We need to find out what that thing is," she said, her voice resolute. "Whatever it did to you, we can't let it stand. Not here. Not now." Amuro nodded slowly, though his mind was still reeling from the strange transformation he had just experienced. "Let's go," he said quietly, though his voice sounded hollow, as if the weight of his own thoughts was pulling him under. They turned toward the exit of the chamber, but just as they began to move, a low growl echoed through the shadows, reverberating through the very stone beneath their feet. Amuro's heart skipped a beat. Something was coming. He drew his blade, its dark, ethereal edge gleaming in the dim light. Elyra did the same, her eyes narrowing with focus. The growl grew louder, closer, until it was no longer just a sound. It was a presence, something dark and primal. From the depths of the shadows, a shape emerged. It was a creature, tall and twisted, its body a grotesque amalgamation of bone and shadow. Its eyes glowed with a sickly yellow light, and its maw was filled with jagged, razor-sharp teeth. The creature let out a guttural scream, echoing through the chamber as it charged toward them. "Stay back!" Amuro shouted, stepping in front of Elyra, his blade raised in defense. But the creature was fast, far faster than he had anticipated, and it lunged at him with terrifying speed. He barely had time to react. The Revenant blade met the creature's chest with a sickening crack, but the force of the impact was too much. The blade was wrenched from his hands, and he was sent tumbling backwards, his body slamming into the stone floor with a bone-jarring impact. Elyra rushed to his side, her eyes wide with panic. "Amuro! Get up!" But Amuro was already moving, his body reacting to the situation without thought. His hand instinctively went to the runes that now pulsed beneath his skin, his mind focusing on the energy that had begun to surge within him. The creature was circling, preparing for its next attack. But Amuro's body felt different now, stronger, more attuned to the power that flowed through him. With a fierce growl he stood, his legs unsteady at first, but then firm beneath him. He focused on the creature, narrowing his gaze. This time, he wouldn't be caught off guard. This time, he would end it. The creature charged again, but Amuro was ready. Amuro's focus sharpened as the creature barreled toward him, its mouth agape in a snarling display of teeth and malice. The runes beneath his skin pulsed with an intensity he hadn't felt before, each heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of his own newfound power. The world around him slowed. His movements became precise, deliberate. His body, once a vessel of uncertainty and fatigue, now felt like an instrument honed for battle. In a flash, he ducked under the creature's first strike, a clawed hand slashing mere inches above his head. The creature's elongated form twisted midair, and Amuro was already moving, stepping into the strike, using its momentum against it. With an effortless twist, he grabbed the creature's arm, using its own weight to fling it over his shoulder and into the stone floor. The impact sent tremors through the chamber. Dust rose, filling the air, but Amuro barely noticed it. His mind was clear, his body a machine in perfect sync with his will. Before the creature could recover, Amuro was on top of it, his hands reaching out to grasp its throat. The air between them crackled with an electric tension, as though the very fabric of reality was reacting to the collision of their powers. "You'll not escape," Amuro hissed through gritted teeth. His voice, though strained, carried an authority he didn't fully understand but had learned to trust. The Revenant blade pulsed in his mind, its desire to strike matching his own. With a sharp motion, Amuro's hands began to glow, his runes flaring in response. He pulled energy from the space around him, channeling it into the very fabric of the creature. Dark tendrils of power spiraled through his palms, wrapping around the beast's form, attempting to suppress its unnatural strength. The creature screeched, its yellow eyes wide with terror. It writhed beneath him, trying to break free, but the more it struggled, the stronger Amuro's hold became. The power he'd felt earlier surged. This was the reason for the transformation. This was the price of the thread. Elyra stood to the side, watching in awe as Amuro seemingly bent the creature's will to his. Her hands tightened around her own weapon, ready for whatever might come next, but for now, the moment belonged to Amuro. "Amuro," she called out, her voice clear but tinged with concern. "Finish it." Amuro didn't answer at first. He was focused on the beast before him. He could feel its pulse, its energy, its every breath, and with each one, he drew closer to ending its reign of terror. His vision blurred, the energy surrounding him overwhelming, but there was a sharp clarity in his mind. He knew what he had to do. With a fierce scream, Amuro slammed his palm into the creature's chest, his runes burning brightly, flooding it with raw power. The beast's screech turned into a guttural wail, but it was too late. The darkness within the creature began to collapse in on itself, like a star imploding under its own gravity. The explosion was deafening. Black energy erupted from the creature's body, swirling and tearing at the very air around them. Amuro threw himself backward, his body absorbing the shockwave, but he stood firm. Elyra was thrown off her feet, landing hard against the stone floor, but she quickly regained her composure. When the dust cleared, the creature was gone. Nothing remained but a scorched outline where it had once been, the air thick with the residue of its unnatural existence. Amuro stood, breathing heavily, his body still buzzing with energy. He glanced over at Elyra, who was slowly getting to her feet. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Words weren't necessary. Elyra wiped the dust from her arms, her gaze shifting between Amuro and the empty space where the creature had been. "I didn't think you'd be able to do it," she admitted, her voice steady but tinged with awe. "That was impressive." Amuro let out a shaky breath, his grip on his blade loosening. He hadn't expected to survive, much less overpower the creature. But there was a strange satisfaction in the way the power coursed through him, as if he were fulfilling something much greater than himself. "I didn't think I could either," he replied, his voice quieter now. "But it's done." Elyra stepped closer, her expression softening. "You've changed, Amuro. You're not the same person who walked into that cathedral." He met her gaze, his eyes distant. "No, I'm not." The silence between them grew, both of them contemplating the gravity of what had just transpired. The air was still thick with the remnants of battle and the remnants of power. But something was different. The sanctuary had shifted once again, as if acknowledging Amuro's newfound strength. Amuro glanced toward the farthest end of the chamber, where a faint light was now visible, a soft, pulsating glow that seemed to beckon them forward. "There's more," he murmured, his voice distant. "Whatever it was that brought me here, it's not finished. We still have a long way to go." Elyra looked in the direction Amuro was pointing, her brow furrowing in suspicion. "You really think that's true? After all this? After what we just saw?" Amuro nodded, his expression hardening. "I don't know what's coming, but I can feel it. Whatever power I've taken, it's just the beginning." Elyra didn't reply immediately. She knew as well as he did that this was only one battle in a much larger war. A war that was unfolding not just in the physical realm, but within them as well. Finally, Elyra stood and adjusted her grip on her weapon. "Then let's keep moving. We've come this far. No turning back now." Amuro turned and began walking toward the faint light, the air around him crackling with energy. "No turning back," he repeated softly, as if reaffirming his own resolve. They moved forward together, but both of them knew that whatever awaited them ahead would challenge not only their strength but their very understanding of reality itself. The path was dark, but it was theirs to tread. And Amuro, with the power of the Revenant and the thread flowing through him, would lead them forward into the unknown. As they walked further into the dimly lit corridor, the distant glow grew brighter, almost beckoning them forward with an unnatural pull. The air was heavier here, thick with an oppressive energy that felt like it was pressing in from all sides. Amuro could feel the weight of it, the suffocating pressure building in his chest, but he pressed on, determined to face whatever lay ahead. Elyra followed closely behind, her eyes scanning their surroundings, ever watchful. She had seen the power Amuro had unleashed, and though she didn't fully understand the source of it, she couldn't ignore the transformation in him. There was something in the way he moved now, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. Whatever he had gained, it wasn't just power, it was something deeper, something that made him stand taller, walk with purpose. They reached the end of the corridor, where the light now illuminated an enormous door, adorned with symbols they had never seen before. The door itself seemed to pulse with energy, as though it were alive. It was an ancient gateway, one that had been untouched for centuries, yet now it called to them as if waiting for their arrival. Amuro paused, his hand hovering over the door. He could feel the faint thrum of power radiating from it, a connection to something far greater than himself, and the runes on his skin responded, glowing faintly in the darkness. "It's time," Amuro said quietly, more to himself than to Elyra. He wasn't sure what awaited them beyond this threshold, but he could sense that this was the true beginning of their journey. The path to answers, to power, to whatever forces were at work, was about to unfold before them. Elyra nodded, her expression unreadable, but the fire in her eyes betrayed her curiosity and readiness. She stepped forward, standing beside Amuro, and together they pushed the door open. The air shifted as the door creaked, its ancient hinges groaning in protest. As it swung wide, a wave of heat and energy poured out from the chamber beyond. A strange, otherworldly hum filled the space, vibrating through their bones. Inside, the room was vast, a cavernous hall illuminated by the same ethereal glow that had been guiding them. It was a place of power, but also one of silence. The kind of silence that felt as if the very air held its breath, waiting for something to happen. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, atop which rested an object. A relic. It pulsed with a dark, violet light, and Amuro felt its power calling to him, drawing him in like a magnet. He took a step forward, unable to resist the pull. But before he could approach it, Elyra's voice stopped him. "Amuro, wait." He turned to face her, confusion in his eyes. "What is it?" he asked, his voice hoarse, still heavy with the remnants of the battle they had just fought. "There's something wrong about this," Elyra said, her gaze narrowing as she scanned the room. "We don't know what this is. What if it's a trap?" Amuro looked back at the pedestal, his instincts screaming at him to proceed. The power was undeniable, the pull almost irresistible. But Elyra was right. They were stepping into the unknown, and this place felt like it was waiting for them, its intentions unclear. "I know," Amuro said, his voice steady, but uncertainty lingered beneath it. "But I have to take the next step. This is why we're here." Elyra's expression softened, but she didn't argue. She had come to understand Amuro's resolve, his need to face whatever lay ahead. "Just be careful," she warned, her voice quieter now. "I don't trust this place." Amuro nodded, his resolve hardening once more. He stepped forward, each step taking him closer to the pedestal, closer to the dark relic that had been waiting for him. The closer he got, the more the power seemed to pull at him, suffusing his body with a strange energy. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly as it hovered over the object. The moment his fingers brushed against it, the entire room shuddered. A deep rumble echoed through the chamber, and the walls seemed to warp, the very fabric of reality bending. Amuro's heart raced, and for a fleeting moment, he wondered if this was a mistake. But there was no turning back now. The relic flared to life in his hand, its power surging, and Amuro felt a surge of energy flood his body, raw, untamed, and overwhelmingly destructive. It was too much. But then, a voice, a whisper, cut through the chaos. It wasn't Elyra. It wasn't anyone he knew. It was an ancient, distant voice, speaking from beyond the veil. "You are the last of the Revenants. You will awaken the forgotten. The threads will bind you, and you will remember." Amuro stumbled backward, clutching the relic to his chest as the vision consumed him. The world around him flickered, warping and shifting. Time and space seemed to collapse, and for a moment, he was lost in the void. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the vision faded. He blinked, his senses returning to him. The chamber was still, silent once more, but the power he held in his hand felt different now, more alive, more aware. Elyra was at his side, her eyes wide with concern. "Amuro, what happened? Are you?" But Amuro didn't answer. He couldn't. He was still processing everything that had just occurred, the voice, the power, the weight of the words. His heart pounded in his chest, and he felt the presence of something ancient, something deep within him, stirring awake. I don't know," Amuro finally managed to whisper, his voice strained. Elyra looked at him, her brow furrowing in confusion and concern. "We need to get out of here. Whatever this is, it's not safe." But Amuro didn't move. His gaze was fixed on the relic, his hand trembling as the strange energy thrummed beneath his fingertips. He could feel it now, clearer than ever. The threads that bound him. The weight of the Revenant's curse. He wasn't just a part of this world anymore. He was a part of something much older, much more dangerous. "We can't leave yet," Amuro said softly, his voice low but resolute. "Not until I understand what this is. Not until I understand who I am." The chapter ended here, leaving a silence in the air, and a path ahead uncertain. What lay beyond was unknown, but the journey had only just begun. Amuro's resolve had been tested, but he had not yet faced the full weight of what he had awoken. The relic in his hand pulsed, promising that the true trial was only beginning.